Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 259. As if things couldn't get any worse for the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, it seems like things have just gotten worse. Now, we know that there have been several unnamed people who have come forward who said that they saw Joe Exotic of the Windsor family at the nightclub Tramp with Virginia Roberts, instead of him being at Pizza Express as he claims. Now, we've heard this before earlier that there was some witnesses who came forward, but now this witness has a name and she has a face. So it adds a little bit more credibility to the statement, right? Whenever we have a witness come forward in a situation such as this, and it's in an anonymous nature, it leaves room for people to second guess who the witness might be. But when you have a situation such as this, where the witness comes forward and goes on record, gives their name, etc., well, it becomes a lot harder for the person being accused to mount the defense, because now it's not only the eyewitness, the person who was abused, but now you're starting to have secondary and third witnesses come forward and say that they saw the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family with Virginia Roberts that night at the club. Not that there was any doubt in my mind, to be honest with you. Look, let's say everything was even, okay? And Andrew hadn't had put together a pattern of playing loose with the truth in regards to this case specifically. Let's say everything was equal. And we had no evidence from Virginia. We hadn't seen the picture. We hadn't seen any of the other evidence. We hadn't heard from Scully or any of the other folks. And it was just her word against his. Even in that case, his alibi and his defense is not strong enough for me to say, yeah, you know what? There's a little bit of wiggle room here for him. Zero chance that anything that this guy has said is a tangible defense. And anybody paying attention to this case and who has been following it and who has put the pieces together understands that Prince Andrew, a.k.a. the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, seems to be lying through his teeth. And now you have this witness coming out and putting her name on the bottom of the receipt. So let's jump into this article and see just exactly what she has to say. This article is from The Sun, and the author is Emma Parry. Headline: I was there. Prince Andrew was at the club with Jeffrey Epstein. Virginia Roberts, not Pizza Express. New witness claims. And again, we've heard this story before, right? A few months ago, they were talking about this, that there were other witnesses who said that they saw Andrew at the club on the same night that's in question, but we didn't have their names. So now that we have their names, again, it puts a lot more weight behind the claim. A new witness claims she saw Prince Andrew with accuser Virginia Roberts at the nightclub, contradicting his insistence he was not there. Shukri Walker said, I remember him dancing and chatting with the young girl. That's pretty damning right off the bat, right? You got this witness who comes out right away and says, I saw them dancing together at the club. Prince Andrew is a liar. He was there. He was with Virginia. And he most certainly wasn't getting pizza with his kids. That is what Shukri Walker, the new witness, is saying here. Jeffrey Epstein's survivor, Virginia, says she was forced to have sex with Andrew after they left Tramp in Mayfair in March of 2001. And we know from the account of that night and from what occurred, the whole story pretty much. Virginia has laid out her account of what occurred, and it's widely available for anybody who is looking for it. Now, we have not seen the same candor from the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, have we? All we've seen is more BS, all we've seen is lies, and all we've seen is excuses. We're talking about the man who says the honorable thing to do was to hop on a plane, fly across the pond, and break up with Jeffrey Epstein. That's the honorable thing to do, but showing compassion or empathy for these survivors wasn't a good idea. So we really can't take anything this douchebag has to say seriously, in my opinion. Andrew denies it and claims he was not even in Tramp on that evening. He says he remembers the date well because he took daughter Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking, Surrey. And again, that might have been something that occurred earlier in the afternoon before his buddies Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had a night planned for him. He might have taken his daughter to get some pizza at some point during the day. That could have occurred. But it is highly unlikely that he was at this pizza shop at the time in question, especially considering all of the evidence that is presented to us. And again, not only Virginia's account, which is absolutely rock solid, and unassailable in my opinion, but we have the accounts of other people now, other people who witnessed them together there, who witnessed this man at the club and not at the pizza shop. Has anybody from the pizza shop come forward and said, wait, he was here with us? We haven't seen any of that. We had the one officer request documents just to find out the guard who requested the documents on the night in question about what time Andrew came back, etc., only to find out that those documents were destroyed. So you see here, folks, Andrew does not have a defensible position, in my opinion. What he has are a bunch of BS claims with a lot of holes punched in them. But Shukri has no doubts it was the prince she saw dancing with teenage survivor Virginia Roberts at a nightclub because she said sorry to him after standing on his foot. So Shukri remembers this clearly because the night in question, she stepped on Prince Andrew's foot at the nightclub. So she knows who Prince Andrew is, right? Everybody in England knows the royal family, I'm guessing. I'm sure that there aren't many people who are English subjects who do not know who the royal family are and who would not recognize somebody like Prince Andrew at a nightclub. That would be like Americans not recognizing, the Kardashians or some shit. But it's the same kind of thing. If you step on her foot or Prince Andrew's foot, you're going to remember that if you're an English subject, right? Damn, I just stepped on the Prince of England's foot. Holy shit. So this woman, Shukri, who has come forward and said that she saw Andrew with Virginia, her story does sound credible. Now, obviously, it has to be vetted, right? Like anything else. We can't just accept things for, if somebody says it, we have to look at the evidence. We have to vet it. We have to see if she was truly there that night, etc., etc. But on its face, this is damning for the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family and his team, especially considering how staunch they've been with their denials of even being at this club. Shukri said she turned to apologize after her mishap on the dance floor at Tramp and found herself face to face with the prince. She recalled he was smiling. He said no problem. So you would, again, if that happened to you and you're a subject of the crown and the Prince of England, the Queen's thirdborn child or whatever, steps on your foot, well, it's probably a big deal and it's something you're going to remember. And I'm sure she told her friends about that. So that's all part of the vetting process, right? For the authorities and for those who are going to bring her as a witness in the case, perhaps. She's somebody that will have to be vetted and they'll have to see where her story goes. But I'm telling you, this does not look good for the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family. Shukri's account is another blow to the beleaguered royal, who has come under intense scrutiny since 58-year-old Maxwell was arrested last month for conspiring with Epstein to sex traffic women. And again, they use this conspiring with Epstein statement in this article like earlier, and I'm just wondering when that's going to be followed by RICO charges have been slapped on them, because it's obvious here, folks, what was occurring, right? It's obvious that this was a long-reaching conspiracy, and it's obvious that there were many people involved. Shukri today said she decided to speak out after watching Andrew's denial during his now infamous Newsnight interview. She contacted U.S. lawyer Lisa Bloom, who represents a number of Epstein survivors. Again, it's pretty well documented how I feel about Lisa Bloom and Gloria Allred. I am not a fan of either of them. I think that in most cases they do as much harm as they do good, if not more. But at the same time, if this witness contacted them and is, using them to get the information to the FBI, then, I guess we'll have to see where it goes. But I have zero trust in Lisa Bloom or Gloria Allred. Shukri said, "When I watched the BBC interview and saw Prince Andrew denying knowing Virginia, saying he has no recollection of that night, I had to come forward. Because I was there. I do have a recollection of it." Shukri said that she and a male friend had been dancing in the club while Andrew was among a group sitting in a corner. She added, "I can remember exactly where they were sitting. They had one of those coolers with ice and a bottle in it. In fact, probably two of those. You could tell they were getting special treatment." So you can see that she remembers the night, obviously pretty clearly enough that she thought she needed to come forward and provide her testimony as a witness statement in regards to lending credence to what Virginia has already claimed. And now, is she willing to go under oath with this testimony? Because if she is, this is bad news for the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family. The man I was with went over there and started talking to them and then came back. Then, at some point, I was dancing with him and stood on the feet of one of the men sitting in the corner, and I said, "I'm sorry." And he was smiling. He said, "No problem." My companion said that man who I stood on was actually Prince Andrew. I'd never seen a prince in my life before. I just stood and looked at this man thinking, oh my goodness, it's a real prince. He was smiling a lot most of the night. He looked like he was having a great time, and he was with this young girl who was close to my own age, perhaps even a bit younger than me. All right, so again, her account has to be vetted, right? We don't really know who this witness is. We don't know how credible she is. And again, unfortunately, anytime Gloria Allred or Lisa Bloom are involved, I am automatically skeptical. But with that said, these accusations that she's making here, that she was at the club at the time, all of this must be looked into. It must be vetted, and we have to see what's what. The man that she was supposedly with, he must be contacted as well, in my opinion. They were not alone. They were with the woman who has just been arrested, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Epstein. I will never forget the night because I was told this is a real prince. That's the moment that stood out for me. I don't think I would have remembered otherwise. Shukri recalled Virginia had an awkward expression on her face. And again, Virginia's a young girl in this club. You would think that it would be a bit overwhelming, right? You're there with a Prince of England. You're there with these high-profile people. You're just a young girl. And of course you would have an awkward look on your face, in my opinion, right? Wondering what the hell's going on. How did you get involved in this? Is this real life? That kind of thing. Because it must have been a bit much to, consume, right? A bit much to absorb, being around the Prince of England and Jeffrey Epstein and, Ghislaine Maxwell. At this point, you think that this is just the very top of life, the very top floor where the elevator of life ends. And in reality, it was so much worse. It was something so much different. They were planning something so much more sinister. And it's disgusting for me to even think about what could have possibly been going through this poor girl's mind. She added, I do remember the little girl perhaps was a little bit drunk or just had a weird expression, an awkward expression, but she wasn't smiling. It was the opposite of smiles. And if you remember, they supposedly, according to Virginia, Andrew was getting her drinks that night, right? She was drinking vodka that night. She was underage in this bar/club. She was getting plied with booze so that when she went back to the Belgravia apartment, she'd be much more compliant. In Virginia's account of the night of March 10th, 2001, Andrew was sweating profusely as they danced. Andrew told Newsnight that was impossible, as he has a medical condition which means he does not sweat. And remember when this BS came out? There's zero chance he has some kind of medical condition, which means he doesn't sweat. That is such malarkey. Absolute BS. Shukri says she cannot be sure if Andrew was sweating, but claims she did see him wipe his face. She said he was using the back of his hand. I don't know with all honesty if he was wiping it because he was sweating or just touching it, but he wiped out his forehead with the back of his hand when he was dancing several times. Well, why else would he be touching the back of his head? Why would he be touching the back of his, using the back of his hand to touch his forehead? Of course he's wiping sweat away if he's making that motion. I mean, Occam's razor and all, right? I remember he was dancing with the young girl and chatting with her throughout the night. Putting pressure on Prince. Virginia, now 36, says she was forced to have sex with Andrew at Maxwell's London townhouse. She says a picture of Andrew with his arm around her was taken there on the same night. Andrew has said he has no recollection of meeting Virginia and suggested that the photo may have been faked. Again, more BS from the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family. We know that the FBI has said that the picture is legit, and we also know that a professional photographer from New Zealand who had access to the picture when this all first started, I forget his name right now, but he also came out and said that the picture was legit. So all we have to go on here is Andrew or his friends saying the picture is fake. Again, a bunch of nonsense. Add to that, if he didn't know Virginia Roberts, if he never had met Virginia Roberts, why did he send an email to Ghislaine Maxwell saying he had a few questions about, you guessed it folks, Virginia Roberts? If you don't know her, if you've never met her, why are you asking questions about her, Joe Exotic of the Windsor family? Maxwell is currently in jail in New York awaiting trial. Billionaire financier Epstein, pedophile, scumbag, child abuser. A friend of Andrew's killed himself in prison, allegedly, a year ago while facing similar charges. Somalian Shukri says she was even more determined to come forward because she was a sex trafficking survivor herself. Well, that's terrible. And you can understand her motivation, right? If she survived sex trafficking herself and she sees this story break on the news and she knows that this young girl is in fact Virginia and that it was Andrew who was with her and it was Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, some of the most prominent traffickers in generations, well, of course, it's going to spur her forward to come and try and help out and provide whatever information she has, right? And you would think that that is certainly a good motivator for somebody to come forward. She was a teenage refugee from her war-torn homeland when she was trafficked from Kenya to Italy and then to London. Miss Bloom believes Shukri to be a credible witness. The lawyer said all she wanted was to get her story to the FBI as a witness to help Virginia. Again, I think this is awesome that she's come forward, but we have to take everything with a grain of salt, right? We have to make sure that all the pieces fit. We have to make sure that she is in fact a credible witness. And when I say we, I mean prosecution if they're going to use her. So I would hope that that's what they're doing right now and not relying on Lisa Bloom or Gloria Allred to do that vetting, because you know that both of them, they're just looking to increase their own visibility in any way, shape, or form possible. So again, got to make sure that these claims are vetted, but these are really damning claims for Prince Andrew's alibi. So she wasn't seeking any money from anyone. She wasn't looking to bring a lawsuit. The FBI decided it did not need Shukri's testimony. Miss Bloom said, "They said we have the story, thank you, and we don't need to bother her." All right, well, as of now, it looks like the FBI has the story, and they don't need to bother her. So we'll see where it goes, and if Andrew gets pulled into this more, perhaps they will revisit this lady and her assertions. The lawyer said a second woman had been in touch claiming to have seen Andrew and Virginia together in the club on that evening. She said she had several phone conversations with the witness who was too frightened to go public. And again, that's the common theme around here. The sources I've talked to, they don't want to go public either. There's a lot of powerful people that are still running around with ties to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise, folks. And you got to understand that people don't want to take the chance of having their lives utterly turned upside down. Ms. Bloom hopes Shukri's story will put further pressure on Andrew to speak to U.S. prosecutors. She said, absolutely they should investigate him. You know, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And this duck spent a lot of time with Epstein. And Andrew's story always seems so shady to me. He has not released any documents, calendars, or journals that would show where he was. Andrew was pictured in Tramp on March 13th. 3 days after it is claimed he was there with Virginia. He was snapped chatting to Fiona Sangster, wife of racing tycoon Robert. And again, it goes against his credibility that he was shown pictured there 3 days later. It's obvious that he was a regular there or went there with some sort of regular schedule, right? You don't go there 3 days prior to your event with Virginia, and then they're 3 days later for whatever the hell you're there for if you're not there all the time. Come on, give me a break. You see, they expect us to believe all of this nonsense. They expect us to believe the BS narrative that they throw out there. And for so long, it was the only narrative that was even getting any play, right? Because there was only one set of rules, and that set of rules was set by the legacy media. But that is not the case anymore. Survivors are telling the truth. Virginia claims she was groomed by Epstein and Maxwell after being invited to apply for a masseuse job shortly after her 17th birthday. She has alleged in court documents they made her have sex with Andrew in London, New York, and the U.S. Virgin Islands in 2001. Last week, more of her allegations were revealed during ongoing hearings related to the trafficking charges against Maxwell. David Boies, Virginia's lawyer, told The Sun last night, the more the evidence comes out, the more confirmation there is that Epstein survivors are telling the truth and that the denials and attacks of Epstein's enablers and participants are a smokescreen. And I'll tell you what, I agree with David Boies there. I've been saying that from the very beginning. The way that these people are going about this, the way they're on a full court attack against the survivors, trying to demean them and trying to destroy their credibility, tells you everything you need to know. If these people were truly innocent, if they had nothing to hide, then they'd be able to go into this with the ammunition that proved that they were innocent. They wouldn't have to look for loopholes. They wouldn't have to try and challenge the credibility of the survivors. But that's what's worked for them in the past. That's how they've gotten off in the past. So they think that strategy is going to carry water this time around. And unfortunately for them, they are sorely mistaken. Buckingham Palace has previously described Virginia's claims as false and without any foundation. It added, any suggestion of impropriety with underage minors by the Duke of York was categorically untrue. Andrew, 60, has not commented on Shukri's claims, but a friend said, it's interesting to see how many people have razor-sharp recollections of events that took place some 20 years ago. It's difficult to believe that these events can be remembered with such clarity at this distance. That's a bunch of BS. I remember stuff from 20 years ago, things that were important to me. In fact, how about this for remembering something close to 20 years ago? My first ever shift as stage manager at the Joint inside of the Hard Rock Hotel was The Who. And on that day, John Entwistle died before the show. I'm not supposed to remember that. That's, my first day in this new job. Somebody in a huge band dies. Of course I'm going to remember that. And it's the same here. Somebody meets a prince. Somebody meets somebody famous. They remember that kind of stuff. That's the sort of thing that you remember. So to act like the recollection from 20 years is like this big deal, well, I think that's ridiculous. Now, if you were saying met some Joe Schmo in the grocery store 20 years ago, all right, that's a little more acceptable, of course. Yeah, okay, maybe I don't remember this stranger. But a famous person? I mean, really? That's going to be your excuse? You don't remember meeting this famous person 20 years ago or stepping on their toe? Of course you would remember that. So when they say the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family's friends, what they mean is somebody on his law team, by the way. This guy has no friends left. In fact, I doubt he ever had any friends to begin with. And you know who most certainly isn't his friend right now? That bipedal serpent sitting in a jail cell who has all of the dirt and knows where all of Prince Andrew's skeletons are buried. And that, my friends, is good old Ghislaine G. Maxwell. And if you're the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, that must give you sweatful and sweaty sleep on a regular basis. Because it's only a matter of time before Ghislaine Maxwell is telling the authorities everything they want to know. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, everybody, you can find the links to this episode and the article within the description box, and I will be back tomorrow, and we will do it all over again. All right, everybody, I hope you all had a great night.